Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is Budah, and this is my third in the series of Budah Explains the World. I've got some excellent stuff tonight. I'm going to talk about something that's been of a huge help to me personally, and that might be of use to other people out there. I'm going to talk about the meat industry and war, the military-industrial complex. There's going to be a bit about COVID. There always will be while this thing's going on, but that's what I'm hoping to talk about.
I see you open your eyes and smile. You say you haven't felt love in a while, and I realize.
First of all, something we call the script. Perhaps it would help if I talked about myself for a little bit. It probably sounds a bit self-indulgent, but here we go, because I think it helps with the story. I was born into a family of four, plus my mum and dad. Middle class, white, privileged, nice area, everything looks good. Trouble is, my old man was a bit of a rotter. He was not a good person, and he was not. He was an even worse father. He was my main influence. I really didn't notice my mother at all. She had enough to cope with. But my father, he was my biggest influence, and when your big influence walks behind you as you're walking and says, "Oh, you're ugly, you're too tall, you look awkward," and fills you full of self-loathing and hate, and you despise yourself, which is I used to. It wasn't a pleasant childhood. Lots of people's childhoods are much, much worse. But everyone has their own version of hell, don't they? So I grew up learning some lessons which weren't helpful to me. I had lots of self-loathing, depression, all sorts of things. So I was a strange person. I didn't fit in. I realise I'm higher on the autistic spectrum than many of my peers. I have dyslexia problems, learning problems. So I didn't have a great start, and my life was not going well. The battle inside my head was outrageous. The little civil war between my ears. Sometimes it was genuinely quite horrific. I would beat the crap out of myself. It was not fun being me. I tried all sorts of self-development. I sat in teepees, had smoke ceremonies, walked on burning coals, that sort of stuff. But nothing really fixed it, because I always had this little voice in my head that ruined things for me. And then I came across somebody called Richard Wilkins. And it was just a free talk. I went along. I was quite open to listening to things. And I listened to Richard and I thought, oh my God, I could be different. And I felt on a cloud for 6 months. But eventually, normal life intruded and I went back to hating myself. And then he came up with something called broadband consciousness. And he and his partner Liz put this training package together, and I was lucky enough to go on it about 12 years ago. And I'm a very slow learner, and I've made loads of mistakes, and I still don't get it right. But what I have learned has changed my whole way of being. I'm so much happier now. I'm a happier person because I've learned to see the voice in your head as we could see it. I've learned to choose more than I ever used to. I don't get it right all the time. I sometimes beat myself up. But I'm getting better and better at it. So I thought I'd pass it on to you as much as I can. It's a different way of thinking about the world and seeing things in a different way. There was something I was really impressed with when I was on placement in Jersey. Somebody talked about CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, and that's about the way we look at things. So a great illustration was a young man goes along for a job interview. They're walking along, and their little voice in their head saying, "Oh, you won't get this. You're not going to get good enough. Other people are better." Da 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 da. And then you step in some dog poo, and you go, "Oh no!" And you try to scrape it off, and it just ruins everything. And you go, "Right, sod this. I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to get this job." You might as well go home and have a beer, have a smoke, whatever, or just feel depressed. You don't even go to the interview. Or, same person, walking along to an interview, steps in some dog shit. Same thing happens. Wipes it off. Thinks to himself, that'll be an interesting thing to talk to in my interview. We can all laugh at it or commiserate. "Oh no, that's happened to me." And it'll be great. It'll be an icebreaker. And I feel confident this isn't going to slow me down. Are they more likely to get the job than the person who never even bothered going to the interview? 100%. Exactly the same circumstances, different way of thinking about things. Seeing it, okay, this has happened. What's the good side out of this? What could be good? Is it going to ruin my day? Is it going to ruin the rest of my life? You can choose to see things in a different way. And that's what learning about the script did for me. Because it was a small group of people and we all told our story. And then people fed back about what they saw. And it was an amazing time. It was such a revelation. And I had always given myself a big kicking. But other people saw me differently and it helped me immensely. So let's get back to the script. What is it? Well, when you're born, you pop out and you're a fresh, blank sheet of paper. There's nothing there. And you go through your life. And your main influences are your parents. And it's an easy one. If you are in the car and your dad is an angry driver, somebody gets in his way and he's rolling down his window and he's shouting and you see that as normal. You see that that's how you do it, that's how you behave. So whether you like it or not, you've absorbed that into your little brain, which also absorbs things like Christmas, Father Christmas, coming down your chimney, reading all your letters. Yeah, no problem. Tooth Fairy? Of course. Who wouldn't believe in that? You accept whatever is. So I saw my old man as the normal way, but that's Dad's, they're all like that. I was very surprised to find out, no, they're not. But anyway, so you can see it as you learn rules and you write it down. Okay, in traffic, if somebody cuts you up, you get angry, okay, there we go. And there's your page of script. You see your mom looking in the mirror and going, "Oh God, look at you. What a mess, what a mess." And then they say to people, "Oh, I'm fine. Everything's great. You must love yourself." But they don't love themselves. So you absorb these lessons. It doesn't matter what you're told. Your parents can talk to their blue in their face about how you should just love yourself and accept yourself. But if they don't, that's the lesson you learn as a child. And it's another page to your script. And your pages of script just build up and build up and build up until we're all walking around with a great wodge of script. All the things that people in authority have shouted it to us over the years. So if you bring up your child and you call them, "Oh, you're so stupid. What an idiot you are." And you might mean it very nicely, but the child goes, "Oh, okay," the little subconscious picks that up. And children act because they think that if they're expected to be one way, if they're stupid, then they should act stupid. Doesn't make sense to us, but to a child it does. So we're building up this script, and that's the one which will always have a go at you, always make you feel worse, tempt you with things, which leads to addictions, but it's not really helping you as a person to be stuck with that script. And the Sugar Babes said it great in one song. You don't have to keep playing on with the hand that you were dealt. So I've had a a fairly abusive father, but I don't have to carry that with me. It doesn't have to beat me up for decades and decades and never really leave me. We do things that we wouldn't necessarily choose to do, things that are not good for us. Like, if you're given, what do you hold on to longest, Greg? A compliment or a criticism?
Probably a criticism.
Yeah, I think most people, I certainly would. A criticism, somebody says something and you're wounded, sometimes for decades after. But a compliment, when somebody says, oh, you did a really good job on that, we all go, yeah. You know, we dismiss it and stuff, and we don't hold on to that. We hold on to the people who've wounded us all the way through our lives.
I try and keep a balance, personally.
Well, yeah, that's the trick, is to do that. Not to always remember the bad stuff, but to really remember the good stuff. Because that's what will make us happy. If we were to choose, well, do you want to get really upset by something? Or do you want to be delighted by something and motivated by something lovely? Which would you choose?
To be motivated.
We would choose the compliment, to be motivated, to feel great. So we would choose that.
I don't know though, because I think in some aspects I take constructive criticism, for example, I take that on board.
Yeah, that's constructive criticism, absolutely fine. Because if you want to improve, then you need to listen to somebody who knows it better than you. Constructive criticism, absolutely fine. But how many people just say, you did this and I blame you for it when you haven't done it?
Yeah, it's not
how many people blame you for something? Yeah. They're not giving you... I mean, I had a great manager in the civil service, and he did the bad news sandwich. So he'd go something... one time he said, you're really good, and you do some fantastic stuff, and he was specific, and you did this and this. And I thought, oh, fantastic. And he said, I really value you, but you did something which wasn't how you should have done it. You needed, this was bad, so there's the bad bit. But I'm telling you this because I know you're really good, and you can make a difference, and you can change, and that you're mature enough to accept this. So there's the good news, and then there's the bad news, and then there's the good news.
Is the bad news sandwich a good or bad?
It's a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's a good thing. It's a great technique. And I felt, wow, and I did that on somebody who was working for me. And, oh God, the same reaction from him. And we both felt, really, wanted and recognised. But with this thing, because I didn't just make it up, but something that you've made a mistake, you've done it wrong, but you're a great person. Now that's management for you. I'm going slightly off the track here. You don't have to obey your script. If somebody gives you some bad news, you can choose to take it personally and beat yourself up and, oh God, I was so stupid and stuff. Or you can choose to take it as okay, but I can move on from here, and I can see the next level, and I can learn from that mistake. Then that's completely different ball game, isn't it? A lot of the stuff we don't choose because in our head, say I used to hear was, you failed, you're a bad occupational therapist, you're a bad person, everybody else can do it, but you can't do it. So that's what I would hear.
The inner critic.
The inner critic. And it's that inner critic. You can choose to listen to it and feel shit and not learn from that thing, or you can choose what's best for you as a person, which is to go, okay, I'll take it on board because I'm worth it and feel good. So you've got to actually choose. The whole thing I learned over 5 intense days was you can choose to do something other than what your script says. So you can walk into a room like I would and go, oh God, nobody will want to talk to me. They're all having great fun and they're all sociable, but I'm terrible at this, and I wouldn't talk to anybody. And you stay on your own and you have a shit evening, and it further reinforces, oh, you're useless at that. But you can choose to not listen to that voice that says you won't fit in and nobody wants to hear you, and go up to people and go, hello, my name's Budah, I join you. And people I found when you actually do that, we'll go, yeah, of course, come in. What are you guys talking about? So you can be welcomed in if you choose not to listen to that naggy little voice.
Mm.
And it's like going for a job or not going for a job, or asking for a raise or whatever. If you listen to that, oh, you'll never get it, then you'll have a lower quality of life. So broadband consciousness, the script, is all about leading a better life, because you don't listen to that bit that leaps up in your defence. Like, if you have an argument with your girlfriend, with Liz, you can, and I don't mean to be personal, but you can have an open heart to heart, and you both understand and hear each other, and you can modify and fit together and go on in a upwards direction. Or you can choose to take offence and go, right, but what about you? Do you remember when you did it? But I did it. And you can rehash arguments and stuff and have a terrible time, and nobody gets listened to, and you just both end up feeling really bad and sore, and it affects your relationship. Now, we've all been in that situation. You're dying to say something.
Yeah, it's like we constantly have choices, don't we? We constantly have choices. And every choice we make leads us down a different path, a different trajectory. So you're constantly making choices. It's reminiscent of a book by Danny Wallace called Yes Man.
Right.
They made a film of it, and Jim Carrey played
I love that film.
Have you read the book though?
No, I haven't. No.
Read Yes Man. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I read it when I was about 18.
Yeah.
And it changed my life.
Brilliant.
In terms of, it was about a guy that was always saying no to things. He was quite negative. He'd always be like, I'm not up for that, I don't fancy doing that because of this. And he'd always have an excuse. And or even if there was an excuse and he didn't think of a way around it, he'd just kind of take that as, oh, it's a no, negative. And he met this guy in the street, and the guy in the street said, say yes more.
Right.
And I think he challenged him to say yes to everything. Every time he's got a yes or no question, he has to say yes. And it took him all around the world.
Brilliant.
He won 25 grand, he lost 25 grand. But he just showed you about the difference between the experiences you have when you say yes. Positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just reminiscent of that when you were speaking, and I just think that it's so true that whether you're saying yes or no, whether you're saying that's good or that's bad, it's taking you and everyone else you cross paths with on different trajectories. So, I feel that what you're saying.
Because for most things, your little voice is going to say something, and it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be, if you go for an interview's an obvious one. Your little invoice will. For some people, it's going to say, yeah, you're going to get this job, you're going to be brilliant. And those are the people, they're all full of confidence and stuff. But an awful lot of people, certainly for me, all these people, they know so much more than you. How you manage to get through your job without being found out, I don't know, because they're all superior, they're better, and you won't get it, and you've been for that before when you mess it up. So if you listen to that, and you go into the interview in that state, you're going to have a shit interview. And I did, on so many different things. Shall I talk to her? She gave me a nice smile, and I think she looks lovely. But no, the fear of rejection, when really it's your fear stopping you. If you don't listen to that little inner voice and you go, well, bollocks to you, I will never get this. May never see her again. And what's the worst? You go up and you say, hello, you look really nice. Could we talk or have a coffee or whatever?
Can I just chime in again?
You can chime in again.
There's one instance I remember which changed my thoughts on interviews for life.
Right.
I had a friend that I grew up with from when we were little kids, about 7, 8 years old. We grew up friends. We're still friends now.
Yeah.
He's a director of a company now, like quite a well-known agency. And he said to me, I was chatting to him about having an interview, and I remember him saying to me, you'll get it. You'll get it. So I said, I said along the lines of, I've got a job interview, I hope I'll get it. And he'd be like, you'll get it. And just him saying that led me into the interview thinking, you know what, I will get it.
Yeah.
I am going to get this job. And now every time I go to an interview, that's my mindset. I'm getting this job.
Right.
I'm going to get it regardless. And it hasn't served me badly so far.
Yeah?
Mindset is everything.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, mindset is everything. And it's that. I mean, if you'd have had, would you have had any, if you hadn't said that to you, say, and you were going in, would you have had any thoughts about would anything negative have come into your head?
More than likely, yeah.
More than likely.
Because I'd often assume the worst about things, or not assume the worst, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah,
often,
I do. Yeah.
Often. Like most things I do, I think of the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
As well as the best case scenario, so
yeah.
it's like I kind of prepare myself for all eventualities, or try to, as best as I can. But still, going with a positive mindset and think I'm going to get this job, but what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah, that's how we could think about things. But we tend, I tend, and people like me tend to hear the really negative and go with that and think, because I used to think, well, it's in my head, I can hear it, and it's not like you hear a voice, but you kind of do, it's in there.
In a monologue, like.
Yeah, it's in a monologue. And I've realised it isn't just me that has that. Lots of people do. In fact, everybody I know has that. And the group that I stay in touch with, Broadband Consciousness, that is such a reinforcer when you realise, because everybody there has talked about their story. They've all revealed things that, would often been locked away. And so we all know that we are all, or often, most of us are slightly damaged. When at the beginning of this thing, the first day, before we met, we met, I had a cup of coffee, before the course started, and I was talking to somebody, I was thinking, God, they're so sorted. Oh, I'm such a mess. All of these people, they're all way better than me, and da-da-da-da. And when we actually started talking, and everybody came out, I thought, oh God, everybody's just as fucked up as me. And they're all putting on an act, like me. I used to go on these courses and people would say, oh, it's like stealing a velvet glove and stuff. And I thought, oh yes, I'm really sorted on this. But the end of the thing, when you've been wonderful and everything, you go out, like I went out to a car, flat tyre. Oh shit. And that was everything gone again. Oh, this always happens. Why didn't you take a spare, why didn't you do this, why didn't you do that, why did you drive over there? And I blame myself and everything's ruined. So we sabotage ourselves so well. I mean, Liz calls it listening to shit FM. It's like a sort of a 24-hour radio station that just broadcasts crap into your head. And that crap is all the stuff we built up over the years, the script. So one of the things Richard calls this is script busters. So sometimes you get that in your head where, right, I'm going to have somebody's wound me up and I'm going to have a furious row with them. And then like guy talks about him and his wife both done the course, and they had a furious row. And he stopped and he went, wait a second. This is the person I love most in the world, and we're having this row about something just because I'm pissed off at something, she's pissed off at something, but we love each other like crazy. Huge love. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, love. And she, sorry, get a bit. But she did the same. She said, oh my God, we've both been listening to our scripts, which is defend yourself, shout, bring in all these things, and that's stuff, because if you've got parents who always used to argue like that, back and forth, what do you learn as a child about relationships?
That's the way you do it.
That's the way you do it. So I saw my dad being so cruel to my mom. Honestly, he was sometimes, he was all the time. He was a bastard, but he had his own problems as well, But he was so cruel to her and to my sister and my, So that's what I saw as a child. So that goes in, and that you can be cruel to people, that you should have stuff. And I've done stuff and I've thought, oh God, that was me listening to my bloody script again. That's my dad who used to do those sort of things. And as a child, like I say, you learn whatever. You don't have a fully developed moral sense. You don't filter anything. I mean, our frontal lobe is our executive functions, all the stuff that makes us question and stuff and think about things and understand. Like as a child, you me and my friends, we saw this thing about parachutists, British, coming down, and they did this thing, they tuck and roll, and we thought that it was the tuck and roll that was the significant part. So we put a great big ladder up, and we were going to climb up, and Miles, we got a bed sheet, and thought, there's the parachute, and we almost broke our legs. We jumped out of trees and stuff, because you see someone with a back cape, and they can do that stuff. So a lot of your childhood you spend trying to kill yourself, and the miracles that I survived all the way through, incredible. But so where was I getting onto it? So you don't, as a child, you don't understand everything, but you just accept it. You take it all in. So I took in all this stuff about I'm bad, I'm sad, I'm cruel. I despised myself early on in life. I mean, I've got a picture of me with my gran, and I was, muscled, got, a six-pack, hair. I was gorgeous, but I, at the time, felt so ugly. I really could, I wouldn't go up and talk to a girl because, what the hell would they, look at me in the mirror, oh, you're ugly. So we have this completely skewed belief about ourselves because we've always listened to authorities. It's your parents, it's your school, it's your media, and we take on all these things, and we don't realise, we think that that's us, but it's our parents, it's all the negative stuff, because your inner voice doesn't go on, you'll get this, you'll be fantastic. It's all the negative stuff. The real you is when you don't listen to it. So that's what I really wanted to sort of impart. It's something to think about. I mean, it's not original. I mean, other people have said this. Look at Socrates and Plato, and people have said it, but it made it much more real to me. I understood it. You could see, a script. You could actually see it. And Richard did this brilliant thing with Gollum, and Gollum's always giving him bad advice and don't do this and stuff. Precious! My precious. But you don't have to listen to it. You can go, okay, you want to keep me safe. Shh, I'm okay. And ignore that and do what you want to do, what is usually the best thing. You don't have to listen to that. You can go, I choose not to listen. I'll always hear that in my head. It never stops. But you can choose actively. If you can just pause for a second, go, wait a minute. What's potentially better for me, and what's the worst that can happen? And make a choice. You might still go along with it, but it's a choice. You've got a choice between two things. And you might decide to do it differently. You might decide not to listen to it. I mostly, or a lot of the time, don't listen to it. I still hear it, and sometimes I go with it, and I have a crap day. I feel bad about myself. But sometimes I go, wait a second. That's the bloody script, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to not be my father. I'm not going to be my worst teachers. Because, as an example, my music teacher when I was little got us all to sing at the piano, and he'd play some notes, and I was terrible. And he said, oh, your voice is like soggy rice pudding, and everyone went, But it stuck with me, and it stopped me from singing something really pleasurable. It stopped me. So I would mime to, happy birthday to you. I would mime things, wouldn't sing. And I went along to something through a thing called Spice, it said singing for the terrified. And I thought, well, I'll go along. And there was 60 of us in a room. And we all said about our relationship to our voice. How do you feel about it? And so many people cited their music teacher. Somebody said something when I was a kid and it stuck with me and I never sang. And then when we started doing some singing, bit by bit, oh my God, it went. And I've loved singing ever since. I'm not great at it, but I love singing with people. I love the whole thing. Wandering off a tangent, but it was that you can listen to your script, it says, oh, you're a terrible singer and everybody will hate your voice and you'll embarrass everyone and you and oh. Or you can go, no, I choose not to listen, and you go to a choir and you have singing lessons and say, oh, that's better. So if anybody listens and goes, I could think about that, and their life gets a little bit better, then I'd be so happy. And I will talk about it more, but I won't go on and on about it. I'll go on to the next thing.
You lift me, I'm dreaming in coloured sound.
I want to talk about the meat industry, and it is an industry. Now, I went along to a Green Party conference a couple of years ago, and in the tent before we went in, there was a group talking about, well, they'd gone into an abattoir with a hidden camera, and they'd filmed some stuff, and I looked at it, and I thought, oh my God, that is so bad, so bad. The bit that really upset me was there was a sow, and she was basically forced onto her side, and then they put a cage over her so she couldn't get up. She was trapped under this, and then all the little piglets would run in and suckle off her and be fattened up, obviously, for pork. And the sow never got to see her piglets. She couldn't cuddle them, she couldn't have them close to her. What a rotten, terrible life. And then those piglets would just be grown for a while until they were fat enough and of the right size, and then they'd be slaughtered. One of the methods I saw was electric plates. They stand on an electric floor and the ceiling comes down and then it kills them. Others chop their heads off or stab them and bleed them. It's not nice, it's terrible. And there's your pork. Chickens are given growth hormones so that they get so fat their legs dislocate and they just sit. Oh, and the little piglets, the tails get in the way, so they just cut them off with a knife. No anaesthetic, nothing like that, just they're in the way. They don't add to the value, so just cut them off. It's our factory farming, it's pretty awful. And then all the male chicks, they're no good, so they get gassed and then fed through a great machine that crushes them down into this sort of pinkish paste, along with all sorts of horrible, nasty stuff in there. And there's your bargain nuggets, there's your McDonald's things. It's a lie, the British fed beef. That's not actually true. Where were these cattle born? Probably places like Argentina and places where they've cut down the forest and killed all the orangutans so they can grow stuff to feed cattle with. Then they go for the last bit of their life 30 days in Scotland or 30 days in England, and then that's counted as British or Scottish beef. It isn't. It's a lie. They cheat. McDonald's are terrible. They're absolutely terrible. My friend has got, I'm going way off the subject here, but sort of on the subject. He found a McDonald's burger in his pocket of a coat, and it was 3 years old because he'd even got the receipt. He keeps those things. And it's not full of fungi and broken down. It's, you could reheat it and you'd probably sell it. If bacteria won't eat it, well, why the hell are we eating this stuff? It's nightmare food. And the meat industry supplies it. Cattle are injected with hormones, antibiotics, which is why lots of things are becoming antibiotic resistant. We're going to run out if we carry on with factory farming, because you can only keep cattle in those conditions if you pump them full of antibiotics. That goes into the meat, well, that is the meat, and that we eat it. So it's a chain. So we're doing some terrible things to ourselves. And I was brought up as a meat eater. I never questioned it. When I went travelling in my 30s after uni, it wasn't safe to eat meat because it's not treated the same way. You'll see carcasses hanging up in markets covered with flies. It's bloody dangerous. So I went vegetarian, and they couldn't understand in restaurants. When I went to China, for example, you're a rich Westerner, you've got 6 months' money sitting on your wrist, in your wristwatch. You can afford meat. So I had to say, I'm Buddhist. And then they go, and understand. So I went on my travels around India, Africa, loads of places, and I just said, I'm a Buddhist. And I had vegetarian food, and it was really nice. I had some beautiful Chinese food. It was some of the nicest food I've ever eaten. It was beautiful. And when I got back to England, and I could eat meat again, safely, I saw something, posters by Greenpeace, or Friends of the Earth, or somebody like that, and they showed the real cost, to make meat takes an awful lot of energy, loads of water, for very little really. It's just not very economical, it's not sensible. Whereas vegetables take a lot less water, a lot less looking after, and they're better for you. So I saw this and I thought, well, I think of myself as an environmentalist and aware, but eating meat, I can't justify it. So I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And this was back in the 2000. There were nut cutlets and some veggie food, but not such as much as there is now. But when I tried it, I could always find vegetarian stuff, and it was nicer, and I felt better. So I became a vegetarian, and my niece is a vegan, and I've been to vegan fairs and eaten lots of vegan food, and I thought, it's actually really nice and it's better. So maybe I should give up some of the other stuff. I've learned a little bit about, I still eat fish, but I've learned about factory farming of fish, and what a mess it causes. I'm thinking, I can't really justify that. I love cheese and eggs, So, I don't know, so I'm going to just eat more and more vegan stuff, because Linda McCartney's pulled pork, well, not actually pulled pork, but it looks like pulled pork, it smells like it, and it tastes gorgeous, and it hasn't got anything shit in it, and it's just basically stuff you can grow. So why bother with meat? Why bother with fish? We're getting better and better at making stuff that tastes great. I mean, when in the 70s they had textured vegetable protein, it was horrible stuff, like cat food but worse.
Wild tangent.
Yeah, wild tangent.
Have you heard Bill Gates has suggested that the developed world should switch to synthetic beef?
I haven't heard that, no, but tell me about that.
I just saw the headline.
Okay.
Bill Gates has suggested that just for affordability and environmental reasons they should.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm no fan of Bill Gates, but even Hitler said something's right, didn't he? And Boris Johnson.
Did he?
That different? Well, no, even Boris Johnson gets something right. A stopped clock is exactly right twice a day. Twice a day. To the very second. Hitler loved his dogs. But he was a rotten bloke, terrible bloke. So we could keep antibiotics. We could stop hormones going through our system and through all of our food and everything. We could stop polluting the seas with plastic. We could stop doing really bad stuff. We could mostly be vegan. Or vegan or vegetarian. You know, the need to eat meat isn't there. And an interesting statistic is that the world's surface, all the land available, is used by almost 50% is used by agriculture alone. So when they're, you know, chopping down the Amazon, it's often to make palm oil and things like that we use in our cakes and biscuits and things, and to feed to cattle. And farmers are paid to put grass down and have cattle, and then they are paid, you know, they ship them abroad, they spend a little time and they go up to Scotland for 30 days, and then McDonald's say, 100% British beef, you know, as though they're part of the answer, when actually they're part of the problem. So we could change really painlessly, because it's really nice food.
Cows need at least 3 litres of water to produce 1 litre of milk.
Yes.
This means high-yielding cows need more than 150 litres of fresh water every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it terrible? I think. That but milk is cow baby cow juice.
Yes.
You know, it's intended for cows.
Has been deprived of their mother's milk.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not, you know, that the cows have a lovely time of it. You know, there's lots of milk substitutes available now. I'm still on UHT, but I'm going to be a bit braver and go for the vegan alternatives, because almond milk is really nice actually.
Yeah, but I hear that almond farming's really bad as well.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
I think there's even people who are doing relatively good stuff can still find some way of being fucking awful.
Hemp milk,
yeah, great. So it's getting better and better, you know. So we just don't need to mistreat animals anymore. There's no need for it. I mean, when whales were hunted almost to extinction, it was for their oil and other byproducts, because we didn't have stuff that went in lamps. So we used that. We didn't have oils that we could make, synthetic oils and stuff, that we could make perfumes and hand creams and things from. So we used products from a whale. Now this is incredibly... Now we can see, what a mistake, that was a terrible thing to do. But we did it at the time because we didn't see an alternative. There's an alternative. So we don't hunt whales, unless of course you're Japan. It's the Faroe Islands.
Is that where they go out to a lake and
they massacre them?
Yeah.
It's absolutely dreadful. It's traditional. Well, so's bullfighting. You know, it still goes on in Spain, I know. But bear baiting, you know, you can say, that's cultural, so we should still be doing it. No. You know, chasing badgers down holes with small dogs, that's traditional. Carrying, you know, hunting foxes, that's traditional. Well, lots of things, having slaves was traditional at one time. Doesn't mean it was a good idea, does it? You know, we should stop doing the really, really bad shit. We can't just keep saying, it's something we've always done, so it's allowable. It's not. It's you know, there's people in certain tribes in Greenland and places who hunt, and they've got a license to do it, because it's for them, it's what keeps them alive, it's what keeps them going through winter. So it fulfills a need for them. In the West, we don't need to do that. You know, it's cruel and barbaric, and we need to stop. That's enough about the meat industry.
Promise me you'll be there when I need you. Promise me.
War. Now, this is something. We tend to think that war is a bad thing. So we don't need endless war. You know, back in the days when the kings and queens said, "Oh, I fancy that territory," and Portugal would take over territory and say, "This is mine," and even Norway and places did it. We were all doing it. We'd declare war on them and they declare war on us. They were always fighting, and it was the poor people who fought. So it was wars for acquisition, really. You know, you wanted to plunder somewhere and take everything out, like, you know, well, where do you think the British Museum got all its exhibits from? Well, they plundered and took it. The British Empire was about taking over places and then basically raping it, building railway lines to get the stuff out. You know, the British Empire was a terrible thing, but it was an economic tool. Having slaves is an economic tool. You know, you want cheap labour if you do something, so free, can't really beat that. Wars of acquisition are still going on. In the Middle East, it's for, well, you know, if you've got a country with loads and loads of oil, you know, you're much more likely to get invaded by America than somewhere with just a terrible dictator at the top. Americans say, oh, but they went in for regime change. Saddam Hussein was a bastard, no doubt about that. So probably was Fidel Castro and several others. But look about South Africa, a bunch of bastards at the top killing their people. The West weren't talking about going in there. There was no resources for them. Plus it was a white regime, white supremacist regime. Mugabe. Now, if you really want to take a dictator out, you know, what about him? He was a terrible man. So regime change bollocks. They went in for oil. You know, when they went out, when troops were withdrawn by Trump, he even said it. Well, we left obviously apart from the troops around the oil fields, protecting for America. You know, it's all about ensuring the oil supply. So it's wars of offence, and they're illegal wars. They're rotten, lying wars. So if we want to have and I talked about this a little bit last time, if we want a Star Trek world where there's no fighting, we've got to stop the war machine, and that is the military-industrial complex. Let me explain some of the wars. This is not stuff which is generally taught in schools. You know, it's all about the Romans and the Vikings and boring stuff like that, which is fascinating, by the way. First World War. I learned at school, it was the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Archduke. He was the top guy in Germany. That's what led to the Second World War. The First World War. But what led to that little spark igniting the powder keg? And that is the thing we need to look at. What made the conditions for war? Because that assassination was just the spark. But there was a poisonous atmosphere. Because Germany was feared. It's a huge nation, lots of resources, lots of well-trained people. And when they unified and came together as Greater Germany, France and Britain and the others were scared of them because they are big, they're huge, aren't they? So America and other nations, Britain included, put a sort of embargo. They're trying to cut things off. So Germany people were dying, millions of people died of poverty on the German side. Then you get something like that triggering, and then World War. It wasn't just the bit in the trenches in France. It was a world war, truly awesome. Millions and millions of people died, including loads and loads of civilians. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But we needed to look at what made it a powder keg, not just what was the spark. So there was lots of very rich people who hated Germany and made the conditions for war almost inevitable. The sinking of the Lusitania, lots and lots of things were facilitated because war makes a lot of money. we tend to think, oh, war, terrible thing, people dying. For some people, like in the First World War, there were 22,000 odd new millionaires and billionaires. Somebody make a lot of money. You sell uniforms, you sell food, you sell munitions, tanks, everything. You make a lot of money. Some people get very, very rich. Somebody acts as liaison between the arms manufacturers, the weapons manufacturers, and the uniforms and all that stuff. Somebody acts as the go-between between them and the government. And the person in the First World War for the Americans, his name was Prescott Bush. I had to think for a second. Prescott Bush, granddaddy of George W. Bush, daddy of George H.W. Bush. So he was the arms salesman, all the contacts, and people made a lot of money. Oh, they made a lot of money. And a lot of common people died. People who hadn't even got the vote. In the First World War, in the trenches, all those Brits, they didn't have the vote. Just the rich white men at the top. The people who've always been in charge of Britain. The ones who owned the land. And some of their wives. History that's taught to us is not quite the history which actually existed. War makes lots of money, remember that. And the Second World War? Oh. Maybe the same sort of people were involved. America wanted to get in to the war for the Second World War because they made a lot of money. But people in America didn't want war. They didn't want their boys dying on foreign battlefields like in the First World War. Didn't want that at all. Didn't want all these wars like Vietnam and Korea. Anti-war. What could possibly get them in? Maybe if there was some terrible atrocity committed, something that would just make Americans go, oh, I want vengeance. Something major, something catalysing, something like, I don't know, a sneak attack, something that took the Americans by surprise and killed American troops and people. And what sort of thing would that be? Well, I've made a big study of the Second World War. I know a lot about it. I've read a lot of books. Pearl Harbor. That was the spark. What about the conditions? What was going on at the time to make the Japanese do something to attack a huge enemy? Did America have a big embargo? Did America have warships which cut off the supplies to Japan, like the oil? Because Japan hasn't got its own oil, and it hadn't made it synthetically either. So it was dying on its arse. Wonder what, do you think that might make people desperate when people are dying of poverty because they're not getting things through? And then the unannounced attack by those dastardly Japanese. Oh, and by the way, they were dastardly Japanese. Military people, terrible, awful. But if your country is dying on its feet and your emperor, God Emperor, says you must attack because we are dying, what shall we do? Well, we can't reach mainland America, it's too far away. Pearl Harbor, though, well, that's within range. Now, before those ships left on their way to Pearl Harbor, people, spies, American spies and British spies in Japan sent warning cables. The British MI6 sent warning cables. There's Japanese destroyers and they've set to sea and they're going to attack somewhere. There was lots of warning. The Americans knew about it. The American planes were all put in the middle of the airfields. They emptied their hangars where they were safe and put them in the middle. And people complained and said, this is terrible. If the enemy came over, they'd slaughter us. And what happened? The enemy did come. So people did know about Pearl Harbor. And all of the really expensive aircraft carriers, the really modern ones, they were out on a training exercise. So it was only the older ships in harbour, and they got killed. And what happened? The Japanese have attacked us out of the blue. How could we possibly expect a thing like this? We must extract revenge. And the Second World War started for the Americans. An industry made a lot of money. And in Germany, industries made a lot of money. But do you know, I went to Waterstones looking for a book on the finances in the Second World War. And Waterstones have got access to huge databases all over the world. And he came back, he was a bit puzzled. He said, well, there's an academic paper that costs 60 quid, but other than that, nothing. Now there's books written on finance for everything. Everything has its books. Finance. You want to look at the Depression? You have books on finance. You want to look at the stock market crash? You have books on finance. People are always coming out with books on finance, and there's nothing there. Are people trying to give a different version of the truth? Is it maybe that the history we're taught isn't accurate? Well, if we do look at history, and we look at it with different eyes, we'll see something different. The military-industrial complex. This is something that Roosevelt talked about, the American president. He said, when you've let the tiger out of the cage, it's very difficult to get that tiger to go back in again. And it hasn't gone back in. So the arms industry, the military-industrial complex, people like Lockheed Martin, General Electric, Northrop Grumman, the Koch brothers, there's lots and lots more. Raytheon. And you have somebody who was on the Raytheon board appointed to the Secretary of Defence. I wonder if there could be a little bit of a conflict of interest. And America spends billions, trillions on arms, and yet it's got people dying on the streets, people being shot in the back by racist cops. And it carries on, and it carries on. And every 4 years they have an election where they can vote for one pack of incompetent criminals or another pack of incompetent criminals, and they think that they've got freedom. Well, if you think you've got freedom in America, ask yourself this question. How many government agencies are allowed to smash my door down and drag me out in cuffs, throw me into prison and torture me? Because America can reach around the world in extraordinary rendition. Oh, you mean kidnap and torture? Oh yeah. It's called different things though. And people who release the information about what's going on in America, well, they have to hide. And they end up in prison or murdered. And that's Julian Assange. In a British prison. He'll get a fair shake of the dance, won't he? Don't be stupid. When you talk about COVID, not from the government's point of view and clapping the NHS and all that stuff, it's not taken well by people. It's seen as, well, you're just somebody who wants people to die, you don't care. But there's so many scientists and other people who are saying no. They're crying foul, this isn't it. It's not settled science, it's not everybody agrees, but the people who disagree get censored. Censorship is going on in our free country, where we go on about, freedom of saying what you want, freedom of speech. That's a sacred thing with us Brits, isn't it? Freedom of speech, well, we haven't got freedom of speech. People are getting censored, getting blocked. How many things do you hear on Radio 2, Radio 4 that disagree with what the government's saying? It's 100%. Well, you don't get 100% anywhere. Eamon Holmes started to say something but got shot down very quickly and shut up. People are not being allowed to hear the other side. And there is another side. COVID is a killer. People die of COVID. People who have a poor immune system, like my mom, it's a very bad disease. I've had it. It's not nice. It's really horrible. But it's only killing less than 1%. That's not an excuse for a lockdown. It isn't. If you get on a motorbike, ride a horse, walk along a crowded street with cars going by, you take a risk. Life's about risk, managing risk. Children haven't got a very good idea of risk, so you manage them. You don't get it, you make it so they don't go out in the middle of the road. But we're adults. We should be treated as adults. Lots of young people who are fit people, there's almost no chance of them dying. Seriously. If you're an elderly person or an immune compromised person, it is possible that could kill you. But if you've got poor health, then that's often the icing on the cake. If you're in end-stage cancer, end-stage heart disease, all sorts of things, you may get COVID, you might get some signs of COVID, but you'll be recorded as a COVID death. So our figures are misleading. It's not 100. It didn't kill 100,000 people. It says 100,000 people died within 28 days of a positive test. So, there's the jokes about, somebody falling out of a plane but having the signs of COVID and they're declared a COVID death. Lots of people, our current flu rate is, I've been told, 0 or close to 0. In America, flu has almost entirely disappeared, seasonal flu, because they're all being counted as COVID. COVID is very catchy, like an Elton John song. But for most people, it is not deadly. We make decisions every day as an adult. So if I want to go to a pub, if I want to meet up with other people, then no one should be telling me as a citizen what to do. It's my choice. I'm not going to go around trying to make people ill. I'm not an antisocial person. I'm a very sociable person. People need skin-to-skin contact. People need hugs. They need warmth. This is what we do as human beings. In Romania, they found under Ceausescu that the kids who weren't picked up and touched died. They've done experiments where they had to stop it because kids who are not picked up and held, they die. This is what's happening to people. People's mental health is suffering. So the lockdown, we've started counting lockdown deaths. They'll be higher, much, much higher than COVID deaths. It's an atrocious, lockdown is something you do with hardened criminals when there's no other option. We need to do something different. We need to do something positive. Have you heard of prophylactic treatment?
I think so.
It's when you take something to positively stop a problem, like a condom is a prophylactic.
Mm-hmm.
So having an abortion isn't prophylactic. It's making something out of the mess after you've made a mess.
It's reactive.
It's reactive.
Proactive.
So wearing a condom, fantastic, proactive. So we're being reactive, right? We need to find a drug, a vaccine to cure people, because some people's immune system is shit, because our food is shit, our way of life is shit. We're breathing in petrol fumes. This affects your immune system. So where's the positive measures? We must make sure all children get a really healthy meal or two. We must make sure that it's easy to eat good food, and all the really expensive, terrible food, all the terrible food is more expensive. We should be having community kitchens. We should be boosting people's immunity. In hospitals, don't give them white bread and sugary tea. Give them fresh juices where they get massive enzymes boosting their immune system.
Green tea with antioxidants.
A green tea with antioxidants. We could do so much better But it's all about making profit. It's all about money. What about doing something that stops it? Like I gave you the thing about cancer, didn't I? Do you get better at treating the bruise, or do you find out why the bruise is happening? That's the sensible thing to do. We've got 3 big hospitals, but they're empty. We've got reduced numbers of nurses and doctors being trained. We've got the reason that the NHS is in trouble is because the Tories and Labour have got rid of 30,000 beds and stacked it full of managers. This is why every year we have the same headlines. It was the same in 2018, 2015. We can't cope, it's a crisis. The NHS is full. We're bursting to the seams. People are dying. The problem is we're running down the NHS so that we can privatise it. So they can privatise it because there's money in the NHS. When I was in the NHS myself, and I was a staff governor, I got so I could talk to the directors and the CEO on a first name basis. I found out that they were misrunning the whole place. They were, you could call it criminal activity. I tried to whistleblow, didn't get anywhere. The finance people are in charge, the money makers are in charge, and services to patients is going down. We're doing the wrong stuff because on top of so many things like industries is rich white men. They own the money, they keep all the money, and we, the people who do all the work, get the least money. It's a crazy, crazy system that just needs to change. And we'll never have peace, going back to the war thing, we'll never have peace while we've still got a military-industrial complex, while we're still having wars fought over land and aggression. That's why ordinary people have got to say, no, that's enough. This is absolutely crazy. This is madness. I need to listen to people who are saying, David Attenborough, he's a great guy, isn't he? He knows his stuff. And he's saying, we're in such a crisis. We've got to do something. Greenpeace is saying it. Science is saying it. We're ruining the world, but we're not stopping. We're making it worse than ever. We're in an oil-based economy, and the oil industry is making a fortune. But it's not necessary. It's like you no longer need to hunt whales. You no longer need to eat meat. We no longer have to have war. We no longer have to have poverty. We no longer have to have the two-party system, which is a joke. We can have freedom. We can have the ability to meet people again. We can have a good economy. We can have lower numbers. Because if we want to get less people on this earth, it's too many of us. Yeah. Well, we can either kill people, cull them, or we can make them give them a share of the wealth. So that not that they have jacuzzis and drive Jaguars, but they have enough food to put on their plate for their family. They have sewage. They have clean water. Just the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Freedom from not being murdered by your government in wars and other things. Freedom to have a decent planet. And it's something we can all do, because there's so many of us who see that life it's not good. We've got loads of shiny toys, but we're losing our freedoms, we're losing the planet, and we're losing our respect for what's going to happen in the future. So I just would love people to think about stuff and realise that we don't have to go along on the same old track. And if you want to have change, if you want things to go from where they are to somewhere better, you have to do something. So join Extinction Rebellion, vote for the Green Party, talk to people, share this video. Fantastic. Listen, tune in to Making Change Studios. Wonderful. So, I've been Budah of Birmingham. Greg's been Greg. And life is good and it can be even better. Good night.